Anti-government protests have erupted in Iran, and now the regime has imposed an internet blackout on the country overnight. Social media videos from inside Iran show thousands gathering in the streets and setting fires across the country. The demonstrations have been happening across multiple cities since around December 28th. They originally grew out of discontent to a rapidly worsening economic situation in the country and have now morphed into wider protests about widespread dissatisfaction with the Islamic Republic government. Iran's exiled crown prince has been encouraging these demonstrations and calling for more over the weekend. U.S. President Donald Trump has weighed into the conflict, threatening to strike Iran's leadership if the government harms protesters, while Iran's supreme leader has accused protesters of working on President Trump's behalf. Thomas Juneau is a professor of international affairs at the University of Ottawa, and he joins me now. Thomas, it's good to see you again. Thank you for being here today, sir.
Thanks for having me.
These protests seem to be escalating in this new year. I mean, what do you attribute this to as you view what's happening in Iran?
Well, the immediate catalyst when the protests started in December was economic. The Iranian currency, the rial, collapsed in December. It had already collapsed a lot, multiple times over the years. So the impact on inflation, on the cost of living for Iranians was massive. But that was the trigger. That was the catalyst. Behind that, the deeper, the structural cause is very simply that the Islamic Republic, the regime, is increasingly unpopular with an increasingly large proportion, much more than a majority of the population. I mean, it's a very authoritarian, it's a heavily repressive regime, it's a heavily corrupt regime, and simply put, more and more people are fed up in Iran.
You know, since October 7th, with what's happened with Hamas, with Hezbollah, Iran itself, it is a weakened force compared to 3-4 years ago. So what kind of a situation is the regime itself in as we're seeing these protests? How vulnerable is it right now?
The regime is very vulnerable, and there's a case to make that the regime is as vulnerable as it's ever been since its birth in 1979, or at least since the worst days of the war with Iraq in the 1980s. As you said, geopolitically, since October 2023, the Islamic Republic has suffered heavy losses. Hamas in the Gaza Strip is not dead, but it is severely weakened. Hezbollah in Lebanon, its other main non-state partner, has also been severely weakened by Israel. The Assad regime in Syria has disappeared. That was its only state ally in the region. And in its three main confrontations with Israel, the last one, the biggest one being in June 2025, the Islamic Republic suffered heavy military losses. I mean, Israel had almost complete control of Iranian airspace in June and was able to bomb almost at will Iranian nuclear sites, military sites, and possibly other infrastructure. So the regime right now, geopolitically, even before getting into the domestic scene, is very vulnerable.
Right. So, but maybe I'm naive on this, but geopolitical vulnerability and domestic vulnerability are two different things, right? Like its ability to do things in Israel and is very weakened, but its control of its own population. What is that situation right now?
Well, on the first half of your question, I would say that there is a link between the geopolitical and the domestic dimension in the sense that the severe beating that the Islamic Republic has been taking for the last 2 years, especially at the hands of Israel, but also the U.S., has caused or has contributed, I should say, to a degree of paralysis within the regime. It is a humiliating defeat for the regime. Everything that it has stood for decades in terms of resistance to Israel has been discredited. And has been a debate for months now that, as far as I can say, has not been resolved within the regime on, well, what do we do about this? So that has caused a degree of paralysis that does have an impact on its ability to respond to domestic events.
Okay, that's interesting to draw that connection. And we've seen, in the backdrop of all of this, President Trump, who has just absconded and exfiltrated the leader of Venezuela, suggesting out loud that the U.S. will back the protesters in Iran. How does that affect the dynamic there, and what does that maybe signal about U.S. intentions here?
Well, like anything with President Trump, it is highly uncertain, and it is very difficult to say what exactly it is going to mean. But the hopeful interpretation is that it can galvanize more protesters to go out in the street, that it can convince some of them that there is a degree of protection offered by the U.S., and that it can impose a degree of restraint on the Islamic Republic. The risk, of course, is that President Trump, as he often does, would say this and then would not do anything about it, which would push people to the street,
Mm.
trigger a heavy degree of repression by the regime, and cause a large number of deaths and imprisonments.
Well, this is what the Ayatollah has warned, right? Claiming that Trump getting involved could lead to more protesters being killed. We've also got the exiled Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi, encouraging the protests to continue, seeing some of these protesters chant things like "Death to the Islamic Republic, Pahlavi will return." Is there a world where we see the regime fall and the descendant of the former Shah come back? I mean, how do you view that?
So there's two separate questions here.
Mm.
My view remains that the fall of the Islamic Republic is not imminent. The regime still maintains control on a heavy repressive capacity. It has not started using all of the police and security forces that it does maintain control on. That being said, there's a major caveat here, which is all of us, whether it's academics, the media, government, civil society, we are all very bad at predicting when revolutions happen, when regimes fall. So this, and it's a bit of a cliche, but it's absolutely true. Regime falls, regime collapses or not are inherently unpredictable. It could happen next month or it could happen in 10 years. And in either case, I would be especially surprised. On the second half of your question, which is the son of the last Shah of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, who
Mm.
was deposed by the revolution in 1979 that brought the Islamic Republic to power. He has grown a lot in stature more recently. He has been trying to position himself as an alternative. He has gained a lot of name recognition within Iran, where a sort of nostalgia for the Shah has emerged in some circles in Iran,
Mm.
where people are too young to remember how his father was highly authoritarian and corrupt. Maybe not quite as nasty as the Islamic Republic is now, certainly not,
Mhm.
but still not a democrat or a popular leader by any means. The challenge now is that if the regime really starts to vacillate and that the son of the last Shah starts to try to position himself as an alternative, it is going to be a very divisive move because he does have genuine support, but he also faces significant opposition. So how that would balance out could be very divisive.
You just said how difficult it is to predict, the lifespan of these things and what the tipping point could be and when a regime could or could not fall. It's also incredibly hard to get really accurate information out of a state like Iran, right? Just the lack of foreign journalists, the inability to verify all the video you see that comes out of there, and just so much misinformation and disinformation out there. And of course, the internet blackouts that the regime can impose. So what should we be watching for as we try to divine what's happening inside Iran right now?
So you are absolutely correct on the difficulty in getting accurate and reliable information. There's a lot of disinformation that is spreading by the regime itself, but also by opponents of the regime outside of the country. The internet blackout that is used by the regime as a way to stifle any hope of mobilization makes it even more difficult. There are no free press inside Iran. Most reliable foreign journalists have eventually left the country because it was too repressive as an environment. In terms of indicators to watch, number one is the size of protests. That obviously matters. They are not as big now as they have been in the past, but they are growing. Size of protests matters, but it's not the only thing. You have to watch for defections. Will
Mm.
leaders, not lower level figures, but higher level figures within the military or the regime, will they defect? That has not happened so far, despite all the and disinformation you see online. The other thing is fissures in the chain of command. Are police forces going to refuse to shoot on the crowd? Are the military members of the military, especially the Revolutionary Guard, going to refuse to kill or beat up their own citizens, their brothers and sisters, their fathers, and so on? We have not seen that so far, but these are the things that you need to watch for in terms of a serious mobilization that could eventually lead to the regime falling.
Thomas Juneau, Professor of International Affairs at the University of Ottawa. We appreciate the time again today, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.